Hi, I'm Andrew Halsman of Family Tree Counseling Associates. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in Carmel, Indiana. I am reachable at 317-457-8668 or A Halsman2, that's Holzman 2 at Comcast.net. I'd be happy to take your call and talk to you about any issues or problems that come up. Thank you for listening. This video is entitled Changing Marriage Patterns, Changing Your Marriage Patterns. Now, anyone who's in a long-term relationship, I believe, has times when they get very stuck in the relationship, times when they're mired in the mud of doing the same pattern over and over again and don't know how to get out of it. And so this video, I hope, will address a little bit of why that happens and a little bit of what you can do to not be stuck in that pattern. Of course, nothing in a few-minute video can answer all your questions. And like I said, if you wish to talk to me, please give me a call. Now, when we get stuck, we tend to do the same things over and over again. So we notice a problem in our relationship, something bothers us, and we leap to trying to fix it. And we can fix it in several ways. One way that people tend to want to fix a relationship is that they think of it logically, they lay out the steps, they try to impress upon the other person what the right thing to do is. Another way a person might fix it is to lay out their feelings and say, well, I'm really, don't think this is working, and I'm really angry at you, and they end up being very critical, or they end up being very whiny and victim-y sometimes. Sometimes they're just kind of saying where they're at, but the end result is they tend to be looking at what the other person is doing. Now, in a relationship, you're in a relationship with somebody else, and what that person does affects you very strongly. And since it affects you very strongly, you tend to focus on what that person is doing. And for example, say you want more sex or more romance in your relationship, and you're not feeling, well, things have changed since we've gotten married, some kids have come along, or we're just disconnected. And what do? Well, you go to that person and say, we're not making love enough. We're not being close enough. We're not doing things together enough. The end result of that is the other person feels very defensive, most likely. They feel very shamed. They feel very guilty. They only are hearing that you're displeased with them, that you're angry with them, and tends to not work too well. Tends to that the person is going to get defensive, or they're going to shut down and withdraw even more. So that's one example. Second example might be your spouse is spending a lot of money. Maybe they shop a lot, and you figure, okay, let me be logical about this. Let me be come to them with a solution, and the solution being, I'm going to figure out a spreadsheet. I'm going to plug in all the numbers, the money that we make and the money that we spend, and have this whole spreadsheet figured out. And you go to that person, you go to your partner and say, okay, here's what we spend, and here's what we make, and here's what we need to do. And you're very black and white and very logically figuring out what's going on, and it's very understandable what you're doing. That other person, again, your spouse, may not be emotionally ready to hear that. They may not be in the place where, even though what you're doing makes sense, doesn't make sense to them. And so you end up being very frustrated and very upset. And both of those can be very, very much doomed to failure, even though you're laying out either your feelings or you're laying out the logic of the situation. What do they have in common? Well, what they both have in common is you're focused on the other person. And if you're focused on the other person, you're not going to get very far in your relationship. You're not going to get very far in changing the patterns that don't work for you. And this is what we tend to do. We tend to focus on the other person in the relationship. They're, as I think of them, the big flashing red light of pain for you, because they're the one who is who are close to you, who is in your bed, who is next to you all the time, the person who you count on and you trust and you love, and this person disappoints you, hurts you, spends your money, doesn't withdraws, doesn't get close to you. You can't count on them in the way you want to count on them. They don't follow through. All these things bring up feelings, and these feelings are uniquely your own feelings. Though you may logically say, understandably say, well, this is not a good thing. Why are they doing this? Nobody would do this. Well, that doesn't quite work because somebody is doing it, and the person that you care about is doing it, and you're being affected by it. And holding them up to some standard, to some black and white standard, even if that standard makes sense, doesn't change the relationship. So here we are stuck. Here we are unable to change the pain that we feel in this relationship. What do we do? Well, if we do the same things, like I said, over and over again, then we get the same result. In relationships, you can even be very loving when you're doing that. You can be very concerned about the person. Another example I thought of was, let's say the person who you're married to has had surgery and they're recovering from the surgery. Well, one way to be caring and loving is to ask them about how they're feeling and how they're doing. And that's loving and caring, and that works for a while. But after a while, if you're doing it, 3 months later, 6 months later after they've recovered, and you're still asking them how they're feeling, and you're still expecting an answer, always for them to give you the positive answer, you may not always get it. You may not get them being happy about you asking them that question. You may not get the response that's positive. Even if they're feeling well, which hopefully they are after all that time, they may be upset about being asked all the time because you're putting them in the sick person position, and a person doesn't like to feel vulnerable. And you're not looking at your own feelings about asking that question. It seems very loving and very caring, but it also comes from possibly you're scared. Possibly you're worried that they won't be there for you when you need them. Possibly you're worried that you'll be abandoned because they'll be sick. You'll have to take care of them, or that you are not going to get your needs met. So if you're not talking about it in this way, and you're just asking the question, how are you feeling all the time, that other person, the person who was the person who had the surgery, may pick up on, hey, leave me alone. This is intrusive. This is not really being caring and loving. This is just bothersome because I've already told you I'm okay, and let me be, recover, and let me be not vulnerable anymore, not be the sick person anymore. So the needs and expectations built up in our life and our experiences very much fuel how we address problems. Fixing the patterns we've established are hard to break, even when we see that they don't work. So, if you have a depressed person as your spouse, as your partner, and you're trying to cheer them up all the time, and cheering them up doesn't quite work. This person is depressed. They may not be susceptible to your charms and to your humor, and they may still be depressed no matter what. You're going to be frustrated, and you keep on banging your head against that wall. You're trying to fix them. You're trying to, just like in the other examples, if you're trying to fix that other person and you're not addressing what it's like for you to be in that relationship, then you're going to be stuck. I mean, that's kind of the point of what I'm saying. So if complaining about lack of closeness or asking about a person's problem of health gets a terse response, why do we continue to do the same thing over and over again? We don't see our own behaviors. Though we see our partner's behaviors and actions very clearly, we become emotionally reactive, and we lose our own ability to observe our own part in the interaction, Lerner says. Self-observation is not the same as self-blame. Self-observation is a process of seeing the interaction of ourselves and others, and recognizing that the ways other people behave with us have something to do with the way we behave with them. We cannot make another person be different, but when we do something different ourselves, the old dance can no longer continue as usual. Our behavior seems logical to us. Once we figure it out and we track down the real problem, we feel we can understand that problem. I often hear someone in my practice say that they need to understand and will go to any lengths to get an answer. Well, that makes sense, right? You're trying to figure something out. But if you're trying to figure something out that in some ways is already apparent, you're not really seeing what's going on in your life. And trying to figure out the factual answer probably doesn't get you too far, because you're trying to pin this behavior and pin how things are going on the other person. And if you're trying to do that, even understanding it doesn't help you. So you understand, okay, maybe they're not as close as you want them to be. Well, let me see. They're not as close as I want them to be because they are mad at me. Well, they may not be mad at you. They may be having trouble at work, but more importantly, probably the pattern that they've established in their life is they're not really a person who can get close very easily. And there might be a catalyst. There might be a problem at work. There might be a health problem, but that only addresses kind of what's happening in the moment as opposed to the long-term piece of this, which is the person that you're with may have intimacy issues. They may have a family of origin pattern where things were not discussed and feelings were not brought up. So if you're focused on the thing, the answer of the moment, that's not going to give you much of a good feeling about the relationship. It's not going to solve any problems. The pattern, rather, will be changed when the focus shifts to what you want in the marriage rather than what is wrong. Often when I ask someone what they're feeling or what they want in a relationship, they're pretty stuck. They don't really understand the question in some ways, because they're still talking about the other person. They're still talking about what needs to change and what is wrong, rather than what they feel, what they want, what possible things they could ask for in the relationship. They don't really know themselves, and that's the big sadness in all of this. If you spend some time working on trying to figure out yourself and some things you can ask for, some goals that you can set, some specific, very clear goals, as opposed to vague ones that are hoping that the person's going to read your mind, or critical ones where the person has to defend themselves and compete with you. And that happens a lot in relationships, where people are just banging their heads against each other, banging their heads, not really getting their needs met because they're being defensive. So as opposed to saying, I want more love in my life, you can say, we need to go out on a date once or twice a week. That would be a very clear and specific goal. I want to make love once or twice a week or 3 times, whatever that is, something very specific, something that the person and you can agree upon, as opposed to some vague pattern, some vague unattainable goal. We should just get along better. Expectations are great, but if you can clarify that, if you can talk about that, and you can clarify what you need, what you feel, what you care about, then you've done a big service in terms of the relationship. Like I said, if you're focused on the other person, then the pattern won't change, whether it's out of love and caring, seemingly, or criticism, or if it's black and white. Those things are what we've established in our life, and they don't change the other person, because we cannot change the other person. No one has that power. As much as you would like to feel that your love or your concern or your logic will change the other person, it just won't. What does change is when you see yourself. If I see myself and I change some specific behavior, if I'm clear with what I need, then the relationship can change in small steps, in little ways. And little steps become bigger steps and become safety and comfort and clarity in the relationship. And that's the goal of all of this. We want to have an intimate and clear relationship based on each individual in that relationship being a person, being an honest person, and caring about what they care about, as opposed to codependently trying to fix the other person, or counterdependently being oblivious to what the other person does. So that's how things change if you work on yourself. And if you need some guidance in working on yourself, like I said, I'm Andrew Holzman of Family Tree Counseling, 317-457-8668, aholzman2 at comcast.net. I'd be happy to spend some time with you and talk with you. Just give me a call or email me. Thank you very much.